Welcome everyone and good morning. It's wonderful to be here and have you join us for our final Griffith Alumni Professional Development webinar this year. I'm really excited about today's topic around belonging and building an inclusive culture in the workplace. Before I start, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are all located today. I acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'm Bridget French. I'm the Senior Alumni Engagement Manager in the Griffith Advancement team, and like most of you, I'm a proud Griffith alumnus. I completed my MBA here in 2020. In a few moments, I'll introduce our two guest speakers, Eamon Ashton Atkinson and Kathy East. Both are Griffith alumni who bring two different perspectives on diversity and inclusion. I'm really looking forward to hearing from them, as I'm sure all of you are. Based on the event feedback we've received this year, this clearly is a topic that you want to hear about. We do acknowledge that we aren't able to cover all experiences and viewpoints on diversity in such a short time, but our two expert speakers have a wealth of experience to share. There are many other ways you can be involved with your Griffith Alumni Network. The Alumni to Alumni Mentoring Program is a great way to connect with other alumni around the world to share your skills and learn with each other. The program is exclusive to Griffith alumni and entirely online, so you can connect wherever you are in the world. Whether you're early in your career, considering a change, or have decades of experience, you can search for a match to provide advice and can also engage in discussion topics with other mentors. Also, did you know that our community groups are now on LinkedIn? These online networks are a great way to connect with alumni in key locations like Melbourne, Sydney, Singapore, Hong Kong, Canada, the UK and other areas. So just follow us on socials to find out more. And if you haven't explored the Griffith Alumni website in some time, I encourage you to take another look at our benefits and resources and see how you can get involved. There really are some fantastic discounts down there for some Christmas shopping. Now, if you're new to Teams Live, there are a few things to help make the most of it. You can ask questions in the Q&A panel on your screen. Please ask questions throughout the presentation and we'll share them with our speakers to answer at the end. If you'd like to remain anonymous when asking your question, then please tick that anonymous box. Eamon and Kathy will both give a 15-minute presentation and then we'll have time for questions at the end. I'll also let you know that this session is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel. We'll email you in a few weeks when that's available, and it's really best if you subscribe to the channel to be notified immediately. And you can also see the other fantastic webinars on offer there that we've recorded earlier in the year. Now, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Eamon Ashton Atkinson, award-winning cameraman, documentary filmmaker and journalist. Eamon filmed, wrote, directed and produced his debut feature documentary, Steelers, the world's first gay rugby club. Steelers has been acquired by Amazon Prime and Paramount Plus and played in film festivals in 7 countries, including Queer Screen Australia, where it won the Audience Award for Best Documentary Feature. His documentary really is a celebration of inclusivity and how a safe space can allow people to be who they really want to be. Eamon completed his Bachelor of Laws and a Bachelor of Government and International Relations at Griffith. He is also a lawyer admitted to practice and was the well-deserved winner of the 2021 Outstanding Young Alumnus Award for Griffith University Arts, Education and Law. Wow. So joining us all the way from London, where it's quite late at night, I will now ask him to unmute his microphone and hand over to Eamon Ashton Atkinson.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, it's a real honour to be here. I never thought, when I was a student at Griffith that, all the sort of twists and turns that it would take after I graduated and that I'd end up here. So thank you very much for having me. If we could go to the first slide, please. So just a bit of background about me. As Bridget says, I'm a Griffith Law graduate. I graduated in 2008. Afterwards, I worked in a law firm, Clayton Utz, but I quit after about a year. I realised law wasn't for me and decided to work in TV. And I had a friend who was working in Channel 7 in Sydney, and I just asked him if I could do an internship there, and ended up working my way as a reporter in Brisbane and the Gold Coast for Channel 7, and then moved over to London and was the Europe correspondent for Channel 10. And then more recently, I just did a 3-year stint in the US, where I covered the crazy election and all the pandemic and all the things that happened there. So I've worked in newsrooms around the world, and I kind of wanted today to just share some like stories and anecdotes and a little bit of my experience on this topic. So if we go to the next slide, please. This is just a poster of the documentary I made that Bridget mentioned before. And if we can go to the next slide. So today I just have 4 pretty simple takeaways on how to be more inclusive and how to create a more inclusive culture in your workplace. So the first takeaway is the only way to bring about change is one small step at a time. And I am such a big believer in this. When I began as a reporter, it was back in 2011, so not that long ago, but long enough that, you know, gay marriage wasn't legal in Australia. It wasn't really socially acceptable. It was just starting to be. And as a gay man, I remember, you know, having to have that fear when I started a new job or met someone new. You know, do I tell them that I'm gay? Do I come out? How do I do that? Are they going to hold me back? Are there going to be any repercussions? So when I started working at Channel 7 in Brisbane, I remember distinctly thinking, well, I've spent too many years of my life in the closet. I'm just going to say it when it comes up naturally in conversation, and if it's a problem, then obviously it's not the right place to work for me. But during my time at Channel 7, I guess I sort of tried to play my part in, you know, creating a more accepting culture for people in the LGBTQ umbrella. So just one story I wanted to share with you to illustrate the point about taking that one small step at a time. One weekend I was working and the producer would sit up on the big desk and they would watch all the stories come in from all the other newsrooms around the country, and they would decide what to run on the evening news in Brisbane and what to miss out. And I remember hearing the producer, the executive producer for the day, laughing and scoffing and making jokes. And I could kind of hear that it was the Mardi Gras package for the parade that had taken place the previous night. And I heard him say that he wasn't going to run it. We used to have this saying in the newsroom, you know, what would Glenda out in Ipswich think about the story? And in his view, you know, she really wouldn't be interested in a Mardi Gras story from Sydney. I, however, thought, well, this is a good opportunity actually that we can try and educate and expose people to these kind of issues. So I went up to his desk and I said, hey, when I was a gay kid in the closet, in fact, seeing the Mardi Gras on TV on SBS, I had to watch it with the doors shut at night and hope no one came in. That was the only exposure I had, and it made such a big difference to me seeing that on TV. And I thought, well, if we can show a minute 20 on the news, you know, a few 100,000 people will watch that tonight, and it could spark conversations, and it could, you know, there could be a young kid out there who's watching with his parents that, you know, helps them come out, or it might spark a conversation. And so I said, you know, I think we should run the story. And in the end, I convinced him and we ran the story. And I'll never know what impact that might have had, but it's just like that small brick you're putting in the wall to build the bigger structure of where you want to be, or what you want to create, the world you want to create. So I guess the takeaway is it's always the small things that bring about change. So where you can, you should speak up. And if something doesn't seem right, it's not always going to be what's commercial, but sometimes you just got to do it anyway. So if we go to the next slide, please. Takeaway 2, constantly ask whether your organisation, team or event looks like real Australia. So I've been blessed. I've lived in the UK, in the US, a little bit in France, and I've got to see how different societies do things, and particularly how they do the news, right? And I grew up and I was trained on Australian TV, and that was kind of how I was indoctrinated. And when I moved over to the UK, I remember thinking, wow, they're putting a lot of like different kind of looking people on the news, and it made me realize actually in Australia we don't do that so much. So if we can go to the next slide, we're still not really doing it. So I went on the 4 channels YouTube, sorry, the 4 networks YouTube channels last night, and just picked the first 4 stories for each and took a screenshot of the presenter or the reporter. And if you look at them, Channel 10 up top, and I know most of these people, Channel 7 on the 2nd row, Channel 9 on the 3rd row, and the ABC on the 4th row. What do you see? They're all white, skinny, good-looking, mostly, everyone appears to be fully abled people. And if you walk around a shopping centre in Australia, everyone doesn't look like that, right? So if we can go to the next slide, please. There was actually a study done about this in 2020, just before the pandemic, called Who Gets to Tell Australian Stories? So the researchers from a few universities examined 19,000 news items broadcast on free-to-air television during a 2-week study period. And if we can go to the next slide, please. They found that 75% of presenters, commentators, and reporters have an Anglo-Celtic background. Only 6% have either non-European or Indigenous backgrounds, and in fact, Indigenous was just 2.1%. And 100% of the news directors were white, essentially, and all male. So these are the people that hire and fire. These are the people that decide what stories are running that night, the order they're running, and how much time to give them. All white males. If you compare that to Australian demographics on the right, 58% white, 21% non-European background, 18% European, 3% Indigenous, it doesn't marry up, right? Now, if we could go to the next slide, please. If you break it down into the number of TV appearances, it's even worse. Indigenous reporters or presenters getting just 1.2%. On the next slide, you can see it broken down per TV channel. On the commercial networks, the biggest 2, Channel 7 and Channel 9, mostly white reporters. Channel 10 has a few Indigenous, as does ABC, and SBS has a lot more foreign reporters, as you would expect. So when I moved to London, I actually remember being shocked by it, and I had a conversation with my mum about it, because there were presenters who had accents, there were presenters who had different colour skin, there were presenters who, weren't skinny models, who just looked like normal people. And I remember thinking to saying to my mum at the time, oh, it's almost like they're just trying to, pay lip service to this. They're just trying to do it, to be diverse, right? But now, having been exposed to it for a few years, I'm like, actually, it's so much more than that. They're really making an effort to try and make the news look like the people out on the street and reflect society. And why is that important? Well, it's obvious. You need that breadth of experience in order to reflect the society. And on the news, you're just getting a white person's perspective, essentially. And I wanted to play a video to show, some of the dangers if you just fill your newsroom with certain types of people. Perhaps mistakes might get through that would otherwise have been picked up if you had a more diverse newsroom. This is from a news clip in America. Is that playing? Yeah.
Coroner is still trying to determine the cause of death and whether she was already dead when the truck hit her. We have new information now also on the plane crash. KTVU has just learned the names of the 4 pilots who were on board the flight. They are Captain Sum Ting Wong, Wee Tu Lo, Ho Lee Fook, and Bang Ding Ao. The NTSB has confirmed these are the names of the pilots on board Flight 214 when it crashed. We are working to determine exactly what roles each of them played during the landing on Saturday.
So obviously someone posted on Twitter like some fake Asian names and they just ran with it, put it to air. And I'm sure if you had a producer with an Asian background in that newsroom, the chances are more likely than not that that would not go to air, that would get picked up, rather than just someone saying, oh, it's a bunch of Asian looking words, let's just chuck that up, it must be right. So takeaway 3, don't be afraid to make mistakes and ask questions. So my advice is if there's something you're not sure about, feel free to ask. If your heart's in the right place and it's clear that you're genuinely trying to understand something, then hopefully the person that you're speaking with won't be offended. So one of the big topics at the moment is transgender issues, and with that comes a lot of language that people aren't familiar with or don't know necessarily what it means. And I see this come up in newsrooms all the time. So people might not know what a cis male and a cis female are, and that just means you're born that sex at birth. People might not know what the term means trans women are women, and what does misgendering mean. So all these specific topics that I see constantly confuse people, and people just sit there silent, not understanding because they don't want to offend anyone. But actually what I found is more helpful is you can join in on a conversation, and if you don't understand, just be honest and say it, and it can be an opportunity to learn. And I think as long as your heart's in the right place, then most people will be more than happy to have that conversation with you. So the final takeaway is join or create a mentorship program. So this works both ways. If you're in a position to mentor someone, you absolutely should, and you should particularly do it from someone who comes from a background where it's more difficult to get a foot in the door. So I was doing some corporate filming for an organisation here, and they've created this program in London called the 10,000 Black Interns Program. And it's all about getting internships in banks for people of colour that would otherwise have a hard time getting their foot in the door, and it's been a huge success. And conversely, if you're a person that's struggling to get doors open, you should reach out to someone who might come from a similar background and see if they can mentor you. So in my final year of law school, I wrote a letter to Justice Michael Kirby, who was just retiring from the High Court, who's a very famous openly gay juror in Australia. Everyone who has studied law would know who he is. I put in the letter my struggles about being gay and in the legal field, and to my surprise he called me up out of the blue, this High Court judge, and he agreed to speak at the Griffith Law School end of year ball, and we kept in touch, and then he actually really helped me out. He asked me to co-author a chapter in a book on legal arbitration with him, and he wrote me a reference that opened a lot of doors. So I would just sort of wrap it up by saying, I had some dark times in my life where I hated my sexuality, where I didn't, feel like I wanted to go on, and this is partly what the documentary is about. But what I've learned is that you just have to keep going, and things do get better. And if you can sort of, focus on positive things and play your part, it's a good way to channel your efforts and energy. So we can all play a small role. Don't get overwhelmed. Every journey is just a series of small steps. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eamon. What an interesting journey you've had, and such valuable insights. I've just really enjoyed all those takeaways around making mistakes and those small steps. I think we can learn a lot what we do as a university and what we do in our alumni programming from that, painting a picture of a real Australia. And of course, we are incredibly passionate about mentoring. As I mentioned earlier, we have a Griffith mentoring program, and we'll pop the link in the announcements. And that's a really safe space for alumni mentors and mentees to discuss this kind of thing. Just a reminder that Eamon can answer any questions at the end. It's now time to hear from Kathy East, Griffith University's Manager of Student Disability and Accessibility. Kathy's worked for Griffith for over 12 years across a variety of roles in disability services, and she now leads a team who manage the provision of disability support to students. Training is a real passion for Kathy, and she strives to increase knowledge and awareness and really embed accessibility and inclusion principles wherever she can. We're really delighted to hear from Kathy today, especially in the lead up to Disability Action Week, which starts on the 26th of November, runs through to the 3rd of December, which is International Day of People with a Disability. Kathy completed her graduate certificate in disability inclusion at Griffith, and she was one of the first deaf persons to graduate as a teacher of the deaf in Griffith's Deaf Student Support Program over 35 years ago. I'll now ask Kathy to unmute her microphone. Welcome and thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Bridget, for that introduction. Yes, we'll leave the years out, but 35 years ago seems like such a long time ago. But yes, thank you for this opportunity to have a chat today. Sorry, I'm just making sure my mouse is on the right screen. Okay, so belonging matters. It does matter. I just want to repeat that I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we meet, and pay my respect to elders past, present, emerging, extend that to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Who am I? As Bridget said, I started as a teacher of the deaf. I've moved into vocational training, education. I've been at Griffith for 12 years, over 12 years, and yes, I was one of those first deaf students to graduate back in 1987. 87, there were no student services, there was no disability support. It grew in 1985, 6 individuals from across Australia came to Mount Gravatt campus to learn to be teachers of the deaf. And that was well before there was any sort of support mechanisms, and it's due to one professor that got off the ground and actually happened. So brought me to where I am today, and I'm extremely grateful. I dabble in mosaics, I'm passionate about accessibility, inclusion, etc. I share a little bit more about myself because sometimes it's important to remember that I'm more than just a person with a disability, and I'm more than just a manager of a disability service in a university here in Australia, Griffith, the best university, right? They're my 2 dogs, Ollie and Millie. Ollie is certainly a lot bigger these days, but I really like that picture. Ollie is also deaf, like me. So what can you do? When we say belonging matters and we're talking about what you can do to increase belonging, I'm going to take you, like Eamon outlined, 4 steps. I'll repeat every of those 4 steps, brilliant points, etc. But I want to talk about this 3 strategies at least. I'll probably talk about more than 3 strategies, but you can take into your workplaces immediately. So the first one is make inclusion about a part of who you are. It is a part of who I am. I live and breathe inclusion in everything I do. Like Eamon said, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I make mistakes, okay? We all make mistakes. But if we don't take that first step, if we don't get involved, if we don't try to increase inclusion in everything that we do, then the world is not going to change. There's a lot of simple things that everybody in every workplace can do. Nearly most of our office environments, etc., or our phones, our computers, our laptops, we use MS Office tools, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. We can make all of the documents that we create accessible. They may not be perfectly accessible, but if they are a lot more accessible, then we're going to be reaching out to a lot more people. Now, I can, usually when I talk about disability inclusion, I usually talk about, and I rattle off a whole lot of stats, but stats are not going to change anybody's behaviour. I can talk about all the stats in the world, but it's not going to change who you are, and it's not going to change what you do. So I want you to think about, what are the little things that I can do? What can I do to change the part of the world that I belong to? So if you use MS Office tools, use the accessibility checkers. They're there in the banner. Under the review tab, you'll find accessibility checkers. All of the steps are there to take you through that. And you don't have to, I don't have to teach you how to do that. It'll explain step by step what to do. Use alt text for all of your images. If you don't know what alt text is, if you have a picture, it's alternative image. It's a text description of that image. Now, both images on that PowerPoint slide you see, they have alternative text behind them. So anybody who's blind or using a screen reader will have that description of the image read out to them, rather than the blind person not knowing what that image is. Okay, use clear fonts, right? We can make things look pretty, use different sorts of fonts, but if they're not readable, they're not accessible. And all the pretty cursive type fonts are not accessible to many people. So keep your fonts clear, keep it simple. Simple is best. All right, check your websites for accessibility. These are all things, no matter where you work, you can do. A lot of organisations will have a website. It's very rare that someone doesn't. So these are all things that you can ask in your organisation. You can ask, you can make your leaders accountable. Okay, ask the questions, not just a few, not just someone with disability in their tag, in their title. It's surprising how many disability questions come to me here at Griffith, but and in all organisations. But I just defer them back to where they should be, because if HR doesn't know the answer to the disability question for staff with disability, then the organisation is not going to change. So it's not for me to answer everything for Griffith with disability. It's for everybody in Griffith. We have a saying at Griffith that everybody belongs. So inclusion is everybody's responsibility. It's not mine. Just because I'm the manager of student disability accessibility, it's not my responsibility, everybody. And this is the same with all organisations. Yes, you might have a boss. Yes, you might have a diversity and inclusion person who's leading your diversity and inclusion project, but it's actually everybody's responsibility to increase inclusion. So ask the questions, not just of your leaders, but of everybody. Look for opportunities to be more inclusive. Amy mentioned internships or mentorships, etc. I talk about, I mentioned stats before, but if I tell you the stats that 58% of people in Australia with a disability are unemployed. Just think about 58% of people with a disability in Australia are unemployed. Now think that that statistic has not changed in 30 years. It has been the same statistic for 30 years. Australia is the worst in the Western world for employment of people with disabilities. So look for opportunities to be inclusive. Look for internships, whether they're paid or unpaid. People with disabilities want the opportunity to prove their capability. What are you doing to assist that? Unless everybody takes responsibility for this in Australia, that statistic is going to remain unchanged. We all need to be doing more to move that statistic. Okay, I work in student disability accessibility here at Griffith University, and 50% of my team has a disability, and that's what I'll continue to push and continue to look for opportunities of where I can employ people with disabilities. Okay, connect with people, listen to stories. Stats don't, as I said before, stats are not going to alter people's behaviour. People want to be inspired. And I can go all on about inspiration porn with people with disabilities, but I not necessarily want to go down that track today, or I'll be here forever. But look for the stories. I can say, I can talk about being deaf, but it's got nothing to do with me being deaf. when I talk about my own stories, because everybody has something in their life. We all have a weakness and we all have a strength, and we all rise by using our strength to help other people's weaknesses. And you too have strengths. You too have weaknesses, and you too can work with that to assist others. Okay? Look for those mentoring opportunities. Look for how you can walk alongside somebody so you can learn more about disabilities and you can help somebody else on their journey. Because if we're not doing that, we could be missing out on so much. We could be missing out on the world's next great invention, innovation, disruptor. We could be missing out on so much. If I stop and think, okay, some really, really simple invention, and that was lever arch door handles, okay? Not your knob door handles, but those lever arch door handles. They were invented purely to meet the needs of a disability, right? In the US, there may be a few hundred people, a few thousand people perhaps, that have an actual hand disability, whether it's that they're missing a hand or due to configurations with hand, disabilities with hand, they can't actually use a knob door handle, okay? So those, you're thinking we've got lever arch doors on many door handles now just for a few thousand people. No, but you could have in the US at any one day up to 26,000 people who have a broken arm. And therefore that lever arch door is going to be more easier for them to use, especially if their broken arm is their dominant right hand, they have to do things with their left hand. Okay, you've now got a change that's meeting not just a couple of thousand, but hey, up to 26,000. But you add into that statistic, there'll be up to 13 million people in any one day who have a situational disability or inability to using a knob door handle, and a lever arch door handle would help. It's a mother who's have a pram holding the hand of a small child. It's somebody who's got an arm full of books and the lever arch handle is really easy to use with your elbow, and you can go on. So a change that helps, you may think helps one person, one small group of people, suddenly help a further 21 million individuals or so forth. It becomes a whole lot more than just a few people, right? It's everybody holding curb cuts on our road, so they're the same sort of need. They were curb cuts for people in wheelchairs, someone with a pram, everybody who's delivering things and walking around the city with trolleys full of stock, etc., etc. Everybody benefits from the curb cuts. You all have a mobile phone with a touch screen. They also were developed for and by to meet the needs of people with disabilities. So you need people with disabilities in your workplaces for this very reason. We can include so many more, and we can do so much more if we are including people with disabilities. Don't be complacent. Eamon talked about Real Australia. Have a look around your workplaces. Is it representative of the real society of which you belong, whether that's here in Australia or somewhere else? Okay, inclusion is about people, and people change. People change all the time. Australia is not the same as it was 30 years ago, 60 years ago, okay? But inclusion of people with disabilities may not have changed. We need to do better, right? 58% of people with disabilities being unemployed, and that statistic not changing, not budging, very, very minusculely, right? In 30 years is not good enough. We need to do more. And what can you do in your organisation? Okay, learn for others. Have a look how other companies are doing it. You know, how is Telstra employing people with disabilities? Do you know? How is PwC employing people with disabilities? How is Griffith? How is UQ? What are the stats? What are the changes? Reach out and ask. Ask the organisations where you see people with disability, ask them, right? Gee, how did you get along with that? How come you have so many people with disability? And ask why not. Why don't you have people with disabilities? Why don't you have people with disabilities employed in your organisations as well? Until we take that little bit of personal responsibility in changing our workplaces, like Amy said, to match the real Australia, the real society that's out there, nothing's going to change, because true inclusion is everybody's responsibility. And as you'll see, that's my passion. So thank you very much.
Well, that was absolutely wonderful, Kathy. Thank you so much. Again, such insights into the power of storytelling and those accessibility checkers. What an easy tip that we can all implement straight away. Certainly those statistics around the unemployment rate for people with a disability are quite shocking. And I think we all can agree that was just a great insight into how this is everyone's responsibility and everybody belongs. So now we do have some time for some questions, so you can pop those questions in that Q&A box, and I'll ask either Kathy or Eamon when I ask the question, and I'll throw to them and ask them to unmute. The first question is from Anonymous. How do you have the courage to speak up the first time when you know you're the one who's different? It sounds like it has to be a safe space to begin with. Perhaps I'll start with you, Eamon.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question because it's so difficult and personal depending on the circumstance. And I don't know, I'm quite philosophic about all these things because we get one life and, you know, you just have to live it how you want and you have to try and shape it how you want it to be. So at the end of the day, you know, we're all worried about what people will think and we're all worried about the repercussions, but you know, if you act out of principle and things happen, then you can never really truly be upset if it doesn't go your way. You can be glad that you took that stand and you did it. So say if Channel 7, you know, were really uncomfortable with me being gay and didn't want me to talk about it, I wouldn't want to work there. And actually when I was working at Channel 10 recently and made this documentary about a gay rugby club that changed my life, you know, Channel 10 was so supportive. They booked me like time on Studio 10 to talk about it, and they sent emails around the company and, you know, made me feel so proud to work for them. And yeah, I guess I hope that answers your question.
Kathy, did you want to add anything else?
No, only that sometimes it helps if you feel you've got a backup or you feel you've got a mentor or somebody when you do take that step. And yes, it can be tiring, can be wearing if you've always got to be that person. So the more people that take that step, you share those share those experiences or share who they are, then the easier it is. But knowing that you have a mentor, knowing that you have a backup, and yeah, I've shared I had disability at different, and you know, you may not land that job when you share that. You may not move on, and it's like I said, well, do you really want to work for them if they have a view like that? But yeah, it can be wearing. But I think for me, knowing that I have mentors or people that I can go to does also help me. Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. And I'll stay with you, Kathy, for the next question. It can be really exhausting having to identify myself all the time and stand up for myself. And sometimes I just want to be included, not identified. Doesn't pointing out diversity all the time make society more separated rather than one community? What an important question. I'll throw to you first, Kathy.
Yeah, it is a very important question. It's like the more things that we can do, so if we can make our documents accessible, if we can make our events accessible, and the less I have to say, hey, can you turn on the captions? Hey, can you employ a captioner or get an Auslan interpreter? When I have to do that, right, and the planner of the event hasn't thought of that beforehand, then yes, it becomes exhausting, because you've got to think, you've got to plan ahead. I can't just go to an event and decide the night before I want to go if it's not accessible. So then you give up and you can't go. So it does become very, very exhausting. So that's where, as everybody does more, then we take that load off, we take that pressure off, right? If you don't know what captions are in Teams, then turn them on. View captions in Teams and look at the auto captions, see how, and turn the sound off if it's not an important meeting, and see how much you can follow with the auto captions to get an idea, right? You'll find that the auto captions are not always fantastic, right? So experience what it's like so you get that idea.
Thanks, Kathy. Eamon, did you want to add anything? The next question is for you anyway.
Yeah, no, next question's fine.
So from Anonymous, we've got, hi Eamon, your tips and advice 100% resonate with me, thank you. I'm from an Asian ethnicity background, and I often see that people from non-Asian backgrounds who often offend me making inappropriate comments, but realise that this often comes from their ignorance or simply unconscious bias, so not knowing their comments or behaviour can be seen as racism. When I face this situation, both in personal and professional environments, I have two conflicts. One, feel offended and angry, but at the same time, and two, I know I have to forgive them because they are just making innocent mistakes due to their ignorance without knowing this can offend people. How would you stand up for yourself and still be able to tell them what they have done and said are not appropriate? Often I just pretend I'm okay because I want to be seen that I am overreacting or confronting with these people. Thank you so much, Anonymous. What an important question.
That was a great question. Thank you for that. Yes, it's interesting. The way I deal with it is with a bit of humour. So my brother would always, he was like in the cricket team at school and in the rugby team and super masculine. And he would always go, oh, that's so gay, that's so gay, that's so gay. And I just got so sick of him saying that. And the way I kind of dealt with it was by saying, oh, so you mean fabulous? And he's like, oh, I don't mean it like that. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, use words that match what you mean. And then he never did it again. So I got around that with humor. I don't know if that will work in your situation, but I think you're right to call people out and say, hey, come on, that's a little bit offensive, or I think so my grandma is Malay. I'm a quarter Malaysian, I can definitely sympathize a little bit with that, and yeah, people just don't really know the harm their comments can have. So I wish you luck dealing with that, and yeah, I hope humour can help. You muted.
Thanks, Eamon, for that response. The next couple of questions are directed at Kathy. Kathy, how does a deaf owner and a deaf dog work together? Do you also have communication breakdown? Personal question for you, Kathy.
Yes, the other night the dog got out. My audiologist came to visit me the other night, and the front door wasn't quite shut, and I forgot I didn't have the garage door shut, so Ollie was off, and I can't call after Ollie. So yes, we do have communication breakdowns, but I can tell Millie to go get Ollie, and Millie will go up to Ollie, run round, and Ollie will chase Millie because Ollie's younger and has less sense, so I can get Ollie back that way. But yeah, we do have communication. Ollie will walk off like a deaf child. Will with hearing parents as well, walk off. If I'm not looking at you, I can't communicate. So yeah, he can be quite challenging, but yeah, he's mostly obedient.
Oh, thanks, Kathy. I'm sure that's a lot of fun as well. It makes for a lot of fun at your house. Kathy, another question from Anonymous. If 58% of disabled people or people with a disability are unemployed, how many more are underemployed? Would we have those? Would we have information on that? Perhaps we can find some links or resources.
Yeah, it's probably a harder statistic to actually define, but it is really, really high. That there are a higher percentage of people with disabilities underemployed. Like people with disabilities will finish a psychology degree and go to an employment agency, get a job, and the employment agency will get them a job in Woolworths stacking shelves, or for a cleaning agency cleaning toilets. So that's extremely common. You can have a degree and not get a professional level job, which is extremely frustrating. So a lot of people with disabilities will then continue on to further education, and they'll have 2 degrees and so forth, but still not be employed in a professional level job. I've had managers say, well, it costs more to employ you because I have to have captioners for meetings. As you move up, it's more expensive. If I keep you at a low level job, you're attending less meetings. I don't have to pay for captioners and interpreters as much, etc. So it is more expensive for a person to move up. And in Australia, unfortunately, we have a job access scheme, which is really good. So it's an important thing for all of you out there. If you do employing people with disabilities, you have access to a job access scheme that will give you money to make modifications. It will give you money to buy specialist equipment for your staff with disabilities, and it will give you up to $6,000 worth of Auslan interpreting or captioning for a deaf person to use throughout the year. Unfortunately, that amount has remained the same for 18 years. So 18 years ago, I could have bought a whole lot more with $6,000 worth of captioning over a 12-month period than I can now. So that's another level of discrimination that actually makes it harder. The cost of a height adjustable desk has increased or changed from 18 years ago to now, and Job Access have paid those cost increases, etc., without any qualms. They haven't kept the cost the same, but they have for interpreting and captioning, which is slightly, immensely discriminating.
So interesting. I mean, surely we have come a long way, but we've got such a long way to go with those stats. So there's still more work to be done, isn't there? Another question for you, Kathy. Discussions around neurodivergence among students are very current at this time. Are students able to register with your team based on this condition? And did you have any comments around, neurodivergence in the work that you do?
We have quite a number of neurodiverse students that we support here at Griffith, and all universities for Australia do as well. We probably have an increasing identification of people with neurodiverse conditions. It doesn't mean that necessarily there's more of them, but more students are willing to identify and share that identification that they're from a neurodiverse background, etc. So yes, we do offer those supports, and those supports are tailored and they're different depending on the needs. Griffith has one of the 4th highest participation rates of students with disabilities in the nation. So we do really good at attracting students with disabilities. Griffith has somewhere around about 4,500 students with a disability at any one point in time. Our highest people group is those with a mental health condition. But yeah, we do have a large percentage of neurodiverse students also.
Thanks, Kathy. A comment here for you, Eamon. I've got no question, but I wanted to say congrats to Eamon. I've been following your career since Channel 10, and it's wonderful to see how you've used your platform and grown. Awesome work, and it's great to know how to be more inclusive for those with disabilities. Thanks, Kavita. Eamon, did you want to give a shout out to Kavita?
Yeah. Thanks, Davida, so much. That means so much. I was just thinking, looking at the slide title, Belonging Matters, How to Build an Inclusive Culture, and depression is at an all-time high, and I think I've alluded to it before. Like I've had depression 2 or 3 times in my life and gone on antidepressants twice, and a lot of that came down to feeling excluded. And so maybe based on some of the questions I heard before, like what we can do as individuals if we're in a bit of a rut is finding that community. And this is what my documentary on the Gay Rugby Club goes into, because when I moved over to London, I basically quit my job at Channel 7 because I was feeling down at the dumps. I didn't know what was wrong. I just was feeling rubbish all the time. And so I was like, I'm going to start a clean slate, move to London. And I stumbled across this gay rugby club. And it was for the first time that I found this wonderful community where I had people with a like mind and a similar sense of humor and a similar kind of path in life. And that's really what turned me around and really made me start to feel like I was living the life that I wanted to feel, all because of this wonderful rugby club. So I guess if you're that individual that's feeling excluded, I would just say to you, keep trying and finding the place where you belong, because everyone deserves happiness, everyone deserves to feel like they're fitting in and to thrive. And if you haven't found that, it just means you've not stumbled across the right community yet. So it took me to quit my job and move to London, and hopefully you don't have to do that and upend your life. But don't just sit there and accept what's in front of you if you're not happy with it. So that's my biggest takeaway. And I guess like I've always been pretty fearless in that regard, that if I'm not happy, I'm just gonna take a risk and give it a go. And you know what, all those decisions I've made, whether it's like moving to America, moving to London, quitting my job, quitting law after studying it, it's when you make those decisions, more often than not, if it's for the right reasons, it can lead you on the path you need to be on. So that's kind of how I would just sort of end my little comments on inclusivity, because you can do a lot to help yourself as well.
Thanks, Eamon. I'll stay with you for the next question. How would you recommend getting leadership teams on board with diversity and inclusion initiatives? And one of the committees at Griffith, I've just seen Sophie Ann's popped in the questions, one of the committees at Griffith is pushing for a more empathetic and less hassle approach to changing dead names for our trans students. So that's just a great example of the small steps to positive change that both you and Kathy have mentioned in your presentations. But what about leadership and really, getting their buy-in to embed inclusion in the workplace?
So if it was me, I'm a real practical person. I would try and target a leader that can bring about change and try and book them in for a coffee or a chat. And then people respond to stories. So if you have a story, and this is like news, it's all storytelling. If you have a story of, hey, this happened, but if we can do it this way, this better outcome will happen, people really respond to that. So if you have an example in your workplace where you might want to be changing, as Kathy said, the default settings on your Zoom calls where it has the captions, or, whatever it is, if you can come up with a story as to why you're speaking with that leader about this issue and why it's important, people will respond much better.
Yep, absolutely. We probably have time for a couple more questions, and I'll go to Kathy now. And this is a big question. You can probably talk for a long time on the NDIS. Someone anonymous has asked, the NDIS sometimes tell people they're not disabled enough for support. What do we do then?
Yeah, you have to find someone who can mentor you, support you, work through that. NDIS does have issues in terms of, it has a ranking in terms of disability. The biggest thing NDIS looks for is the functional implications, etc. I just came out of an AAT challenge review with NDIS yesterday, and I won. So in my case conference with them yesterday, so I'm feeling quite chuffed right now. And I was just applying for a light system that the same as many other deaf people were applying for as well. Okay, but at getting with other deaf people, how they've applied for, why they've applied for, why they got knocked back, etc., and getting that information collectively together helped me with my process. And then I am now sharing that with others as well. So I guess, finding people with disabilities, perhaps the same sort of disability that you have, who are in NDIS or who have been rejected by NDIS, can help you on that journey. So reach out to other people, and there are major disability groups that can help with that as well. Queensland Disability Network is one of them, for example, here in Queensland. But reach out to those groups so they can walk you through, because they've experienced this with many people. So if they can help you and share the experiences to others, and this person did this, they weren't successful, this person did this and they were successful, that might help your journey there as well.
Thank you, Kathy. Final question, and remember, if we don't get to all the questions, we will look to answer them in the post-event email. But last question for Eamon. Can I and how can I build inclusivity even if I'm not ready to come out to my workmates yet?
I guess a practical step is to maybe join and go along to, if your organisation has like a Pride network. But I mean, I would almost like challenge you, and you're not ready to come out to work yet. Maybe ask why and what can you do to help get yourself ready. And I know that crushing feeling of being in the closet and worrying about the implications, but I tell you, when you walk through, you just feel that weight lifted off your shoulder and you feel like your life begins, because you're not worried about what other people think, and you're not having to almost like hide. You know, you might be out in your personal life and you're worried about, like, what if people see you out on the street holding hands, or what if someone sees you at a club? I mean, I've lived that fear and that dread and that guilt. I would, you know, encourage you to try and, you know, speak with someone who could potentially help you come out. So that, you know, that's my unsolicited advice. I hope that's helpful. And if you want to reach out to me personally, please do, and I'd love to help.
Thanks, Eamon and Kathy. Thank you both, and thanks to our wonderful participants today. What a fantastic collection of questions. That was incredibly valuable, that Q&A session, and I can't believe we explored so much in such a short time. If your question wasn't answered, we will look to answer those in that post-event email. So we will email you out with some links and resources that we can share with you. I hope you now have a few actionable ideas to implement professionally and personally, really to make inclusion part of your everyday life. Personally, I've just thoroughly enjoyed that, and I've got a whole lot of takeaways and had great insight from both Eamon and Kathy into this topic today. We'll send a follow-up email, as I mentioned, in a few days, asking for your feedback on this session. This is also a really great opportunity for you to submit ideas for future topics for webinars like these. Today was recorded, so we'll email you out the link to this so you can watch it again, share with your friends, and catch anything that you missed. Our next webinar is planned for February 2023, a brand new topic with another Griffith alumnus, or maybe two. Please keep your eyes peeled for an invitation to that in the new year. We ran a webinar in September with Mel Kettle. That was all around self-leadership. That's already available on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to that, that's Griffith University Alumni and Giving. There's a link on the alumni website to view that. Again, a huge thank you to Eamon and Kathy for sharing your time and your expertise with us. We're incredibly grateful, and thank you all to attending online this morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.